Are the clergy spouses back? Some of you. All right. We'll go slow. Welcome to the 64th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Northwest Texas. As always, all right, yay! In person, 2 years in a row. As always, we got to start with the announcements. The youth didn't even do anything. That's good. So, all right, in order. Silence and turn off all noise-making devices. Got it? The main emergency exits are located both in the front and rear of this room. Restrooms are in the hallway behind you and down the hallway to your left. There are recycling bins spread around this room. They are not trash cans. Please place only aluminum cans and plastic bottles in those. Clean office paper, like some of you have probably printed for this convention, may be recycled by placing it in the basket on the back table. Thanks to Texas Tech Canterbury Episcopal Campus Ministry for setting that up. Only voting members can be seated on the floor of the convention, this part up here. Voting members must have signed the credentials sheet today, and you'll also have to sign the sheet tomorrow morning. Everybody sign in today? Wi-Fi password is currently displayed on the screens. Brave much? That's probably taken from our alma mater. The network is Merkit. Yes, there you see it. Hope you've had a chance to visit the vendors in the back, the exhibit areas. Please do. Nominating committee's report will be presented shortly, and we're now past the time for floor nominations, just FYI. The convention guidelines, policies, and procedures document, along with other voting and parliamentary procedural items, are located on the convention webpage. Questions or points of order must comply with the following procedure. Proceed to a floor microphone, 1, 2, and wait to be acknowledged. Maybe another one. Nope, that's it. Okay. Once acknowledged, state your name and your congregation or organization you represent before proceeding with your remarks. Follow this procedure every time you come to the microphone, even if you've introduced yourself previously. And the procedures for debate are listed on the bottom of the guidelines, and we'll review them if needed. Other than procedural motions, all motions must be presented using the online motion form. And that link was sent to everyone ahead of time and is also available on the convention web page. Announcements for convention must be in writing and given to the chair of the Dispatch of Business, Canon Mike Emer, or Vice Chair, Debbie Cox. Now, I'd like to make some introductions. Convention officers, members of the diocese, and diocesan staff. So, Michael Pullen is the secretary of the diocese. He has been delayed getting back from a trip, so I'm introducing in his place Elizabeth Jones, assistant secretary and vice chair of the Credentials Committee. Elizabeth is also the diocesan administrator, my secretary, the chair of the Necrology Committee, chair of the Elections Committee, and she is seated right now in Michael's place on the dais. Chair of Dispatch of Business, Canon Mike Emer, Canon of the Ordinary. Vice Chair is Debbie Cox, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. Diocesan Treasurer is Frank Dedrick, St. John's, Odessa. Assistant Diocesan Treasurer Carol Holly, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. Chancellor of the Diocese, Tom Choate, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. Parliamentarian of this convention, the Venerable Chris Rampelmeyer, who's also the Archdeacon of the Diocese, serves at St. Andrew's, Amarillo. He's at the St. Andrew's table. That you got split up, I see. Talking in class. Diocesan Finance Manager, Anna Mora, working the projection computer back here. Anna. Texas Tech Canterbury Chaplain and Diocesan Communications Coordinator, Leanne Wigner, is at the staff table. Oh, there you are. Got you. And the Diocesan Youth Coordinator, Renee Haney. There she is. Our convention guest speaker, the Right Reverend Dave Bailey, Bishop of the Navajo Land Area Mission. We'll have a presentation later. Several people in the ordination process. A few of them are already postulants, which means they've been officially approved to begin their formation studies. One postulant is present with us today, and that's Zachary Bartkus. Zachary, sponsored by St. John's, Odessa. We're pleased to have a representative from the Seminary of the Southwest with us this year, Dr. Cole Joden. He's back there in the corner somewhere. He would love to talk to you about the Seminary of the Southwest, I bet. We have several Texas Tech Canterbury students with us this convention. They'll be taking turns at several of our vendor booths, assisting. Otherwise, they'll be attending these meetings and events, and I'd like to introduce them by name and where they're from. You will see this is not unlike the Canterbury experience in England. This is multicultural. Bryce Barnes from Brenham, Texas. Ricardo Bello, Bogota, Colombia. McKinnon Bundy, Lubbock, Texas. Josefina Carcamo, Cartagena, Colombia. Sydney Cavazos, Fort Worth, Texas. Amanda Danheim, San Angelo, Texas. Hannah Gavan Luger, I don't think I got that right, but it's close, I think. Tehran, Iran. Kayla McBurney, Abilene, Texas. Jarrett Warren, Amarillo, Texas. Bria Winfrey, DeVille, Louisiana. Bethany Wilson, Lubbock, Texas. Thank y'all. Oh, I missed one. I jumped over Jeremy Lowry. Is Jeremy back there? He's not there right now. Tell him I'm sorry. So clergy changes in status since the 2021 convention. Ashley Colley was ordained as a deacon on December the 18th at the Church of the Heavenly Rest, Abilene, her sponsoring parish. She graduated from the Seminary of the Southwest in May with a Master of Divinity degree, began her ministry as curate at Holy Trinity Midland on June 1st. On June 9th, she was ordained as a priest at Holy Trinity. Ashley Colley. Gene Scott served for years as a bivocational priest, supplying in various parts of our diocese, then served for about 18 months as interim rector at St. Stephen's, Lubbock, until January 31st of this year. As we said earlier today, Jean and her husband Gary departed are departing tomorrow morning for their new home in North Carolina, and we will miss them. She's, I think, not here. Yeah. Justin Gibson. Justin Gibson became the rector of St. Stephen's, Lubbock on February 1st. Justin was ordained to both the diaconate and priesthood in this diocese and served for a period in Dalhart before accepting a call to be the rector of St. Francis on the Hill in El Paso, which is part of the Diocese of Rio Grande. And we're very pleased to have Justin back home in our diocese. Debbie Womack, who is a vocational deacon, transferred her letters demissory from the Diocese of Colorado to Northwest Texas in April, has been assigned to St. Stephen's, Lubbock, and unfortunately she's not here today, had a previous commitment, but Debbie Womack. Courtney Jones was ordained a priest on May 14th at her sponsoring parish, St. Andrews, Amarillo. As many of you know, Courtney and her wife, Michelle England, have moved to Washington State for Michelle's job. Courtney will continue to work remotely for St. Andrews through the end of the year, and we are fortunate to have her back in Texas for this convention. I'm not sure which table. Over here. David Perdue, I see you back there. David Perdue concluded his year as part-time priest in charge at St. Nicholas Midland at the end of May. Thank you, David. And we're all pleased to announce that St. Nicholas has made a call. They've called Amy Haney to be their next rector starting November 1st. Amy's coming from Trinity, Fort Worth, where she was the associate to Robert Pace. So Amy will be here November 1st. And she does not spell her last name the same way as all the other Haneys. It's different. Paige McKay has served as a deacon for many years at St. Stephen's, Lubbock, and has also worked at All Saints Episcopal School in Lubbock, splitting her time between registrar and chaplain. On June 1st, her role switched to full-time school chaplain. Brian Callan became the vicar of St. Stephen's, Sweetwater, and All Saints, Colorado City on June 6th. Brian comes to us from St. Andrews, Bryan, Texas, part of the Diocese of Texas. Where? Susan Piggott, who has an MDiv and PhD from other denominational works, received a certificate in Anglican Studies from the Seminary of the Southwest in May. It's kind of weird sending someone with a PhD to seminary, but anyway, we did it. And she was ordained as a deacon on June the 23rd at her sponsoring parish, Heavenly Rest, Abilene, and she began serving there on August 21st as deacon and pastoral assistant. Susan. Celia Ellery resigned from 17 years of ordained ministry at Good Shepherd, San Angelo, the vast majority of which was as their rector, and entered into retirement on July the 1st. Celia Ellery, not here today. But Thomas Keith resigned his position as deacon at Grace Church, Vernon on July the 17th. Jim Walker, unfortunately, ended his service as vicar of St. Luke's, Levelland. There he will at the end of this convention, assuming the convention approves the standing committee resolution to close that mission, which will be presented tomorrow. Tremendous job by Jim Walker as the vicar of St. Luke's, Midland. Where are you, Jim? Levelland. Mary Glover is not changing her clergy status, but I had to let you know that Mary is unable to be with us this week because she recently fell and broke both wrists, so we're all praying for a smooth and speedy recovery. She fell off the roof, so that anybody that knows her is not surprised that she was on the roof. Is there any other clergy status change that we didn't think about? I think that's it. All right. So credentials, I now introduce Elizabeth Jones, Vice Chair of our Credentials Committee.
Okay. Of course, 10 minutes before this started, the QR code that was on the back, that is on the back of your name tags, died. And so it no longer works. If you have already logged into the new voting system and haven't gotten back out, you should be good. But Anna saved the day. And so we now have a new QR code that she's going to project. You can scan it with your cell phone. And if you don't do it that way, if you go in through a computer or a tablet, in a minute I'll tell you how you can log in using a search engine. I feel like I think you can do it from that angle, Mike. Oh. Are we having success? Yes. Okay, we have Canterbury students who are very well versed in computers and technology who can help anyone that's having problems. Just raise your hand. Good. If you need help, please raise your hand so they know who to go to. Are y'all good? Oh, Josefina, one over there. The hand raised. I knew this would happen.
What can we say? We're ready if we have to.
It didn't work. I mean, I've never had a QR code die before.
did a lot of this at General Convention, but the Wi-Fi wasn't strong enough and wasn't working, and we would just sit there, and some people were in, some people weren't. As I do here frequently, I just tethered my phone.
That's what I did.
Moved on.
Okay, hopefully this won't take very long. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. But there's a lot still taking Anna. There's a lot still taking pictures. She said some people are not being able to do it.
As usual, I have the prayer book Bible open to Great Commission. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got mine up right away. Even at an angle.
Okay, here, they can use mine. Okay. Are we getting the codes in? They told us they could do up to 500. Hope my daughter doesn't text me something real stupid while that really she's forever texting me.
Last year we emphasized quite a bit.
I didn't emphasize that. But that was the first person who said that on the phone. Other than Frank, who says that it was Paul. He said, I never heard that. I said, go get your phone. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay. Right. Is there anyone who is still having problems getting on? Okay. We have another way you can do it. You can use a search engine. Anna's going to put up the address. Like you go to your Google search or your Edge or whatever you have on your device. That's not the right one.
We found that if we turned off our Wi-Fi, it worked better.
Okay, because a lot of people, with all these people, that might help too, turning off your Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
But then go to vpol.mobi. I'm not on Wi-Fi. So, he's good. Once the question is, it'll pop up.
Repo.
Yes. Yes. If you're going through a search engine and you type in vpoll.mobi, that screen will pop up that's showing, and you can type in that little white box, NWT 2022. Enter.
So some need that other app.
There. Yes. No, not log in. The bottom part. Anna, can you please put the QR code up again for just a moment? Some people still wanted that. We're going to edit all this out of the tape. Just say it.
All the deputies to general convention are used to this.
The Diocese of Texas had their special convention, 50 minutes to get
On.
technology.
Oh, it seems like it's been an hour.
We have paper.
We do
so
have
we may
paper.
have to-
I've already got the credentialing, but they have to be on the vote. Be able to get on. I have to run the office and print all those ballots. So if we cannot photograph, I would be happy.
I didn't know it was going to take a trip to the office.
I have it ready. Like I said, just be ready, but don't print them all because that's just a waste of resources until we need it. You can always save the vote until after, you know.
We have a printer here.
Can anyone, if anyone is still having problems, please raise your hand because we need to move on if we can. Ooh, and it got quiet.
Nobody's raising their hand.
Okay, I think we are ready. Monica Hart, there you are. All right, we are going to practice voting you're going to let me know if you're here. So, Monica is going to project the very first polling question. It should appear on your device. It says, "Are you here?" It's the Wi-Fi. Just wait a minute. Oh. Good. You haven't logged in yet. Matt, you're pretty computer literate. Can you help her? Get your computer. How you doing? 75 for the lay people who signed in? Oh, that includes ex officio. How many with ex officio? So 75 and A is 83. That's plenty. Go ahead and close the vote.
I've got 78. We have 78 left, 38 early. And I have 39 clergy signed.
Okay, has everyone had a chance to answer the polling question?
Just me.
The polling session is now closed. You're now going to tell me what church you came from. Clergy, you should not be able to answer this if I set the thing up right. You'll be able to see it, but you won't be able to answer it. Only lay people should be able to answer this question. Try it, just pick something. Try submit.
When we tried it in practice, I tried to do that.
Okay.
You guys know how to put
Yeah. He said he was with y'all and it worked. I know. It didn't work right. Live and learn. I know. I saw. Oh. It's. You lost the website. I don't know. You weren't supposed to be allowed to answer it, but it I know.
We gotta stop the session and have immediate text from Beto. Immediate what? Text from Beto. You know, this is see that I got a text.
Now he has to log in again. Whatever his login is. He works in the So did he. It was my fault. You have 5 more seconds. The poll will close. Okay. But I have the paper numbers, and that's what we're talking about. Did you have an urgent message? Beto, too. Does he want to call you?
I didn't get one right now.
Yes, it was an accident. All right, that will be how we will vote when we get to actual nomination. The people that have been nominated, I will announce the polling question is open. Monica will hit the button, it'll show up on your phone. You'll pick your answer, hit submit, and we should have a vote. But we also have paper. That's why we have you sign this morning. So, Right Reverend Sir, Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution of the Diocese states a quorum for convention is a majority of the clergy entitled to seat and vote, and lay delegates representing a majority of the parishes and missions of the diocese. There are 51 clergy in this diocese entitled to seat and vote. Of that number, 39 have registered and are present, and I declare a quorum of clergy to be present. There are 16 parishes in the diocese that are entitled to representation at the convention. Of that number, 15 have registered and have delegates present. So I declare a quorum of the parishes to be present for this business session. And there are 8 missions in the diocese that are entitled to representation in convention. Of that number, 7 have registered and have delegates present. I declare a quorum of the missions to be present for this business session.
So, the 64th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Northwest Texas will now come to order. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in this diocese for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. This time I'd like to introduce Jim Haney, St. Paul's Lubbock, President of the Standing Committee.
On? Yay. Right, Reverend Sir, a quick moment of personal privilege. First of all, as a representative of the Haneys, we are looking forward to having Mother Amy Haney joining us in this diocese. But y'all do need to be aware there, as the bishop said, there is a long-running feud between us about the correct way of spelling Haney. I contend the 5-letter streamlined way is the correct way, and she and I disagree. So, but looking forward to having her. She's an awesome lady and great priest. So, on a more serious note, we almost lost a Haney in our family this past spring. Renee had scheduled surgery that was not life-threatening and unscheduled surgery that was. When you're talking to a surgeon at 2:15 in the morning in an emergency room and you're getting wheeled into surgery at 3:45 in the morning, the situation is not necessarily easy. In fact, the surgeon's words was this condition was dire. But we do thank the members of our St. Paul's Church family. They were so supportive. And I want to take this opportunity to also thank you, our diocesan family. You all were just incredibly supportive during Renee's long hospitalization and her lengthy rehab afterward. And we've just been overwhelmed by the love and care and concern from all of y'all. So on behalf of Renee, who's tearing up back there, but that's okay, dear, we're very appreciative of you all. So thank you. Business at hand. We have a resolution from the Standing Committee passed yesterday. Whereas the San Miguel Arcangel Odessa congregation has not yet completed the financial audit requirements of the Episcopal Church for the year 2021, and thus in accordance with Diocesan Canon 2, Section 7, their delegation is not entitled to vote at the 2022 Annual Diocesan Convention. And whereas the Vicar and Bishops Committee of San Miguel Arcangel have petitioned the Standing Committee seeking exemption from the aforementioned canonical requirement to allow their delegation to vote at convention, and whereas the Standing Committee is convinced that the leadership of San Miguel Arcangel will in fact see that their audit is completed without delay and submit a completed copy to the office of the bishop as quickly as possible, therefore, resolved that the delegation of San Miguel Arcangel Odessa be granted an exemption to Diocesan Canon 2, Section 7, and be entitled to vote at the 64th Convention of the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Northwest Texas. And this was unanimously approved and moved by the Standing Committee.
So every year we do this for someone. I mean, it's just the canons require it. So second is not needed, does require 2/3 majority. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It passes. All right. Thanks, Jim. So it's time for the commissioning of the clergy, wardens, lay delegates, officers, staff, and members of the diocese. And that is located on the convention webpage and projected. And all those that I just named, please stand for this part. That's probably most of you.
Yeah.
clergy, wardens, lay delegates, officers, staff, and members.
Everybody but guests.
All right. Brothers and sisters in Christ, we are all baptized by the one Spirit into one body and given gifts for a variety of ministries for the common good. Our purpose is to commission the clergy, elected delegates, and officers of this diocesan convention to the special ministries to which they've been called by Christ Church. Will you, as you are engaged in this work, perform it with diligence? I will. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord. And you are exalted as head over all. Save your people, O Lord, and bless your inheritance. Govern and hold us now and forever. Let us pray. Eternal God, bless and guide all your servants who are gathered here as members of this convention. In the earnest passions of debate, give us clear minds. In the moments of decision, give us courageous hearts. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is good and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you. I call upon Dan Wigner.
A little lever on the, yeah.
Hello. Right Reverend Sir, I move that all visitors to this, the 64th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese in Northwest Texas, be granted the privilege of voice.
This does require a second. Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hooray. All right. We're moving. Dispatch. I now introduce Mike Emer, Chair of Dispatch of Business.
Two things. One are announcements, but first of all, Right Reverend Sir, the Dispatch of Business Committee moves the adoption of the order of business as found on the convention webpage under Schedule. No changes.
Do I need a second? No second needed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
I have a number of other announcements. Some of them are typical if you've been here before, and if not, then you can listen again, I guess, everybody. But you'll notice the blue boxes on your tables, the UTO, United Thank Offering boxes. Please give generously. We will have our annual UTO in-gathering tomorrow morning during morning prayer service in this room. We will need one representative from every congregation to help with this in-gathering. And for that, we thank Vanjie Peak, who is right over here. Vanjie is coordinating this effort. So if you would please let her know who your representative is. It doesn't have to be a female. Just somebody from your congregation who will help distribute or place the envelopes in the basket in the front here. It's not a difficult procedure. But please let her know so we can do that in the morning. It's a very honored tradition here. In the vendor area, Texas Tech Canterbury, as you heard from the bishop earlier, is really helping out quite a bit there. They're peopling, don't want to say manning, the different booths in there for various different organizations for which they get some of the profit for that. But they are selling all kinds of things: lapel pins, prayer cards, Episcopal shield stickers, Episcopal themed bumper stickers, Episcopal and diocesan themed t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hoodies, as well as handmade Anglican rosaries made by the Canterbury chaplain, Mother Leanne Wigner. Personally, they're very nice. I've seen them. Canterbury is also selling items for 4 other vendors, including Eternal Threads, Amani Yaju, okay, Colores de Pueblo, and Thistle Farms. The products include purses, bags, wallets, shawls, stoles. Similar. What's a tea among friends? Jewelry, lotions, candles, aprons, table runners, soaps, clothes, and many more. All the proceeds go to the Ministry of Canterbury Episcopal Campus Ministry. And this is a great time to start your Christmas shopping, or maybe conclude your Christmas shopping. There's also a fundraiser going on by the youth of the Diocese of Heavenly Rest. They have made greeting cards, which are available for sale or donation at the Heavenly Rest booth. Mr. Dan Wigner, who you just heard make a motion, is selling some of his published books about spiritual practices. Dan is a member of St. Stephen's here in Lubbock. He's a mystical theologian and religious sociologist with a PhD in theology and sociology from the University of Durham. Dan currently teaches at All Saints Episcopal School in Lubbock. He's a licensed preacher as well and does quite a bit of education at St. Stephen's. So I encourage you to purchase his books. United Campus Ministry in San Angelo has a booth that are highlighting their important ministries. I've looked through it. There's quite a bit there. University of the South at Swanee and also the Seminary of the Southwest have informational items. They both located at the same place, back in that corner. Please stop by the youth table and contribute to the Episcopal Youth Event, which is commonly known as EYE, to help support the folks, the youth from Northwest Texas, who will be headed to Maryland this coming summer for 4 days with over 1,000 youth leaders and clergy from all over the Episcopal Church. Donations can be made in cash or check and dropped into the lockbox that's on that table, or if you prefer to use a credit card, stop by the Canterbury table and they can take your donation that way. It's a marvelous event, and every youth that's ever been and every bishop that I know that's ever been has just found it phenomenal. And Renee, thankfully, is well now and can help make sure that happens like she has several times in the past. Typically, it's every 3 years, but because of COVID, it was delayed and then it was postponed, and they just waited till this year. The members of the Daughters of the King in Lubbock are gathering here in prayer for our convention. If you have a special prayer request, please stop by the DOK table and fill out a prayer request form. There are a few copies of the diocesan financial audit and other items of interest can be found on the distribution table in the back. So that concludes my announcements.
Thank you. But you're back up, right? So I now call upon Mike Emer, Chair of Approval of Minutes.
I was just having this conversation with Father David Romanek a little earlier, how much I like being in a small diocese where I get to be the jack of all trades and the master of none. So as you heard, the numerous things that Elizabeth is in charge of, I am in charge of a few like this. So, Right Reverend Sir, the Committee on Approval of Minutes moves that the minutes of the 63rd Diocesan Convention be approved as found on the convention webpage.
Second is not needed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Now call upon Mary Tinsley for the bishop's appointments. Report on the... Oh, I do these? All right. I call on me. Bishop's appointments appointed by the bishop and confirmed by the convention. All right. Commission on Ministry until 2026, Nancy Hart, St. Nicholas Midland, and Archdeacon Chris Rampelmeyer, St. Andrews Amarillo. It does require a motion and a second and a vote. I hear Romanek say so moved. Second right here. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Church Attorney until 2023, Erica Hall, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. Just by way of note, Church Attorney, that Church Attorney's role involves clergy disciplinary issues found in Title IV of the Episcopal Church Canons and it is a separate job than the diocesan chancellor. So just as the last time, it requires a motion and a second.
So moved.
Chris, got a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, on the disciplinary board until 2025, 2 people, Ed Dowdy of St. Andrews, Amarillo, and Miriam Scott of St. Andrews, Amarillo. Need a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Diocesan Chancellor until 2025, Tom Choate, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. Need a motion? Second? All in favor? Tom, say yes. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Diocesan Treasurer until 2025, Frank Dedrick, St. John's, Odessa. Need a motion? Got a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Diocesan Registrar until 2025, Elizabeth Jones, Diocesan Administrator. Need a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Diocesan Secretary until 2025, Michael Pullen, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. Need a motion? So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Thank you all for serving. Thank you. Those who have accepted these appointments. Now I introduce Mary Tinsley of Emmanuel San Angelo, Chair of the Nominating Committee.
This is a test, isn't it?
Do you want to come on up here?
Thank you, sir. It's been my privilege this year, thank you. It's been my privilege this year to be the chairman of the nominating committee, and the great privilege was the amazing nominating committee. So if you're on the nominating committee, would you mind standing up for just a second so folks knew who not to call again? No. Thank you. All right. For the Northwest Texas Episcopal Board of Trustees, if you will please come up in front of the dais. Dais, thank you. When I call your name, Mr. Bill Aikman, St. Andrews, Amarillo, is not here, I understand. Okay. Mrs. Helen Benton, St. Andrews, Amarillo.
All the way back there.
Mr. John Caldwell, Emmanuel, San Angelo. And Mr. Mike Denny, Heavenly Rest, Abilene, is not in attendance. So these are your nominees for Northwest Texas Episcopal Board of Trustees. Stay where you are. Thank you. Standing committee until 2025, the Reverend Ricardo Lopez, Odessa Episcopal Churches. The Reverend David Romanek, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. Those are, we'll be electing one clergy. And one lay, Ms. Debbie Copeland, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. And this is for standing committee until 2025. Executive Committee, 1 clergy until 2025 and 1 clergy to fill an unexpired term to 2023. The Reverend Dee Dee Ballou, St. Andrews, Amarillo. The Reverend Corey Cabes, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. The Reverend Justin Gibson, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. And Mr. Felix Lewinsky, Emmanuel, St. Angelo, is the lay nominee. You all know him as Ski. University of South Board of Trustees until 2025. 1 clergy, the Reverend Tammy Breitbarth, so sorry. Breitbarth, thank you. Thank you for coming up anyway. St. Andrews, Amarillo. 2 lay, Ms. Cindy Phelps Strite, St. Stephen's, Lubbock, not able to be here right now. And Mr. Carl White, Emmanuel, San Angelo, also not able to be here. General Convention deputies for 2024, actually, isn't it? Yes. Okay, all right. No, that's okay. I just want to make sure. So 4 clergy primary and 4 clergy alternates. Our nominees are the Reverend Canon Mike Eimer, the Reverend Bob Hennigan, Holy Trinity Midland, the Reverend Ricardo Lopez, Odessa Episcopal Churches. Some of y'all, the nominating committee had on speed dial, thank you. The Reverend Paige McKay, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. The Reverend Miriam Scott, St. Andrews, Amarillo. The Reverend David Romanick, Heavenly Rest, Abilene. So we also have 4 lay primary and 4 lay alternates for General Convention. Mrs. Kathy Balch, Heavenly Rest, Abilene, is not able to be here. Mrs. Mary Emeny, St. Andrews, Amarillo. Mrs. Carla Haliva, I'm so sorry. I spoke so well before I got to this microphone. I just want you to know that. Holy Trinity Midland. Mrs. Shelley Neighbors, Emmanuel, San Angelo. Mrs. Margie Netherton, St. Andrews, Amarillo. She is not able to be here. And Mr. Dan Wigner, St. Stephen's, Lubbock. These are your nominees that you'll be voting on very soon.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary Tinsley, and thank all of you who are standing for an election. That's a vulnerable thing to do. Thank you for your offering to serve in this diocese. So there are no floor nominations. There haven't been any received, so the nominations are now closed. In accordance with our diocesan constitution, I'm in the right spot, aren't I? Yes. In accordance with our diocesan constitution, Article 6, Section 4A, I hereby instruct the diocesan secretary to cast the ballot on behalf of the convention for the unopposed positions of Standing Committee Lay, Debbie Copeland, St. Stephen's, Lubbock; Executive Council Lay, Ski Lazuski, Emmanuel, San Angelo; University of the South Board of Trustees, Clergy, Tammy Breitbart, St. Andrews, Amarillo; University of the South Board of Trustees, Lay, Ms. Cindy Phelps Strite, St. Stephen's, Lubbock; and Carl White, Emmanuel, San Angelo; And they are all now elected, so thank y'all. I now call on Elizabeth Jones, Chair of the Elections Committee, to give directions on the balloting procedures. Fingers crossed.
Somebody
Prayers.
say a prayer. Remember about 4 years ago when we had the paper ballots and it took forever? Let's hope this works. So I'm getting ready to have her open the first polling session, which will be for the Board of Trustees. You should still have the site up on your phone or your tablet. Please pick one. Oh, you need my thumb, don't you? Sorry about that. Okay.
We're not gonna have a ballot. But anyway, we don't announce these.
Right. Has anyone not voted yet? Okay, we'll wait. We're watching them come in. No, it's in the. Hmm? Well. She's okay? Right. I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds.
It won't make a difference
I know.
in the voting.
Go ahead, Monica, close the poll.
So keep trying because we have more ballots, so just keep trying to get in.
Yeah, but we've already gotten to the. To log in? Yeah.
We don't have
But we have to say we're going to have another ballot. Oh, yeah.
But we have several votes.
Right. Okay, we're going to move on to the very next poll, which should be Standing Committee Clergy. Monica, open the poll. Please select one. I know. Oh. Monica, did you send that to the moderator? Okay. Okay. That's good. Okay. Monica, close that poll, please. Please send the next poll. This will be Executive Council Clergy, if my memory serves correctly. Please select one. Did you send it to me? Anyone still voting? Shh. Monica, close the poll. The next one is General Convention Clergy. You will select 4. Monica, post the poll. Okay, tell me when we get to 120, okay? We're at 119. Anyone still voting? Monica, close the poll. Now you will vote for 4 lay individuals for General Convention Deputy. The poll is now open. That's not bad. Debbie said it takes about 2 minutes for each ballot. We're only at 112. We're getting close. Does anyone need more time to vote? It felt like a gnat or a mosquito. Okay. Okay. Monica, close the vote. Those were all the voting processes for right now. After, is it after the bishop's charge? After the bishop's charge, we will announce any elections that we received.
All right. So a break is not scheduled at this point because we didn't know we were going to have that delay, but I need to know if we need that break. Can we go into the address? We need the break. This is a quick break. Okay. 10 minutes.
You don't have
I think to the restroom. Oh, there I am on. Yes, ma'am.
I have to tell you that the best walking I saw all yelling, yeah, protect. I was. Because Mark was there. He said nothing. That was just boring. If that's the last time we ever meet.
So I was, God's watched first time. Kathy and I drive down the same road. So we used to see about half of the border. We were staying at Good Shepherd, Good Shepherd, Bristers. Actually, he's A&M, she's Texas. A&M was coming on. Did they not mention this? We'll fix that. Well, which,
On the air conditioning. It is freezing. Seriously, freezing. Like people have blankets and jackets. And Matt is going to get an ear infection.
it's good to see you. Not yet. I might here in a minute. You never know.
All right, come on in. That is. All right, start moving on in. I think we've got the temperature control solved. Now it's hot. I think the restroom lines are. Don't think there's any more line, right? We're ready. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by expressing gratitude to all who served in today's celebration of the Holy Eucharist. In particular, thanks go to John Hollins of St. Paul's, Lubbock for today's music, and Pastor Melanda of Heavenly Rest for reading the Gospel in Swahili. We got acolytes here from San Miguel. Berger from Emmanuel. Great. Thank y'all. Also like to thank those who led our 2 workshops yesterday afternoon. Corey Cabes led a workshop on exploring spiritual treasure. It's a highly effective method for evangelism and formation, both. Carla Haliva, and I think along with David Romanek and the rest of the General Convention deputies, held workshops reporting on this summer's meeting of General Convention in Baltimore. Thank y'all. Clergy spouses gathered for lunch today at the Tech Club, and I would like all our clergy spouses who are present to stand. And thank you. And finally, I'd like to thank the diocesan office staff. Anna Mora is our financial manager. She works closely with our treasurer, Frank Dedrick, and our assistant treasurer, Carol Holly. Anna's worked in our office for about 15 years. Is that right? Anna Mora. Yeah. Elizabeth Jones is our diocesan administrator, also serves as my executive assistant. She's served in our office, I think, 7 years. Mike Emer, canon of the ordinary, has served this diocese in that capacity twice. The first time was 4 years, and then this time, if my math is right, it's been 10. Is that right? Leanne Wigner serves in a part-time capacity as our communications coordinator in the office, while her primary focus in is her work as chaplain to our campus ministry at Texas Tech, and she's been with us, I think, 3 years, if I'm right. That's right, Leanne. Renee Haney serves as our camp director and youth coordinator. She has served the youth of this diocese for as long as I can remember. She's had the title for more than a decade. As you heard earlier, Renee's had a rough year. Complications from a surgery kept her from her role for being physically present as the camp director this summer, but her daughter, Lisa Grandorf, has been by her side over the years, and she stepped in. The whole Haney family did, of course. And I know that Renee has been in a lot of prayers this year, and we're grateful to see her here today. Gary Stanford is not technically on the office staff, but he has served in his role as campus minister for Angelo State University for now 15 years. He's had a health challenge this year as well. We're really glad to see you here today, Gary. Thanks to this dedicated and talented office staff. So every diocesan convention is a time of transition. I would like to recognize and thank those who have completed terms of service on a variety of boards and commissions and committees. And many of you have agreed to be reappointed to your position. Some of you have already been reelected, but thank you anyway. Those completing terms include Standing Committee, Jared Howes of St. Andrews Amarillo and Judy Lazuski of Emmanuel San Angelo completed 3-year terms. Board of Trustees, John Caldwell has completed a 5-year term, standing for re-election. Executive Council, Ricardo Lopez of Odessa and Matt McGuire of St. Nicholas Midland have completed 3-year terms, and Courtney Jones resigned her term to move to Washington State. Thank you. Commission on Ministry, Nancy Hart of St. Nicholas Midland and Chris Rampelmeyer of St. Andrews Amarillo have completed terms and have been reappointed. Constitution, well, we can clap for them. They did serve. Constitution and Canons, Jim Haney V of St. Paul's Lubbock and Karen Bonnell of St. Matthew's Pampa have completed 3-year terms, and they've been reappointed. Disciplinary Board, Kathy Campbell of St. John's Odessa has completed her term, and Celia Ellery, former rector of Good Shepherd San Angelo, has retired. Ecumenical Officer Edson Way completed his term and has been reappointed. Intake Officer Jean Scott of Lubbock has resigned her position, as you know, and retired and moved. Church Attorney Erica Hall of Heavenly Rest Abilene completed her term, has already been reappointed. Sometimes, see, I give this before these elections, but she's already been reappointed. General Convention deputies, clergy deputies who attended were Mike Emer, Canon of the Ordinary, Courtney Jones of St. Andrews Amarillo, David Romanick of Heavenly Rest Abilene. Lay deputies who attended were Carla Haliva of Holy Trinity Midland, Mary Emeny of St. Andrews Amarillo, Mary Tinsley of Emmanuel San Angelo, and Rick Tinsley of Emmanuel San Angelo. Deputies who were elected but unable to be present included Cliff Craig of St. Andrews Amarillo, Joe Craig of St. Andrews Amarillo, and David Perdue who at the time was serving St. Nicholas Midland. So let's show our gratitude to everyone who has served in these diocesan lab ministries. Did I leave out Frank? I did. Terrible. Frank Dedrick went to convention, or he was elected. I'm sorry, Frank. So I want to acknowledge aloud that we did things in person this year. We did confirmations with gathered congregations present, not, like in secret. We did ordinations with people present. We did weddings and funerals with people present, had receptions and everything. Congratulations to those of you who continued with the live streaming, and it's been great being with y'all in person this year. After much deliberation, the Episcopal Church held its convention in Baltimore. It was a year late, and the legislation was limited to 4 days, but we did do it in person. So that was great. I do want to draw to your attention two things. First, Mike Emer served as the chair for Program, Budget, and Finance. That is a big job. Program, Budget, and Finance for the Episcopal Church, the entire church. What is the budget? $100 million a year, something like that. It's a big job. He had a high profile at convention, made us very proud. There's great affection and respect for Mike around this church, and I know we all share in that. Let's show our gratitude. Second, both houses of convention, the House of Deputies and the House of Bishops, voted to consent to the reunification of the Episcopal Church in North Texas, formerly known as Fort Worth, with the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. This was an emotional and celebratory moment, effective at that convention when that final vote was taken. The diocese in North Texas became the North Region of the Diocese of Texas. I continue to serve there to help facilitate this transition. I don't yet have a firm date for the conclusion of my service there. As a diocese, you have made a significant contribution to the Episcopalians of North Texas, and I thank you for it. So as I mentioned in this morning's homily, Kathy and I were privileged to attend the gathering of the Anglican bishops and spouses this summer at Canterbury, England. The Lambeth Conference usually takes place once every 10 years, but for multiple reasons, including COVID, it had been 14 years since the last gathering. It was a memorable experience. It was not and is not lost on me that we were gathering in a 1,400-year-old cathedral that predates the Reformation, with all those years of prayer and worship, not to mention the martyrdom of Thomas Becket. It was humbling to walk around that cathedral, the nave, the choir, the sanctuary, the crypt, and see all the tombs and memorials of archbishops and bishops and deans, and realize that I never heard of 99% of them. So just in case I was in danger of becoming all puffed up about being there on this grand occasion, I realize that will be true for me. Is already. It really is ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It really is hallelujah. It really is, as the poet said, seize the day. No less memorable and meaningful was the gathering itself. The theme for this Lambeth Conference was God's Church for God's World. I know that we live in a big, broad, diverse world, but I had never experienced such a diversity of cultures and ethnicities and languages in one place at one time. The huge tent in which we gathered for the addresses and presentations had a long bank of booths for for the interpreters, and everyone was given a headset. And it was like the United Nations. We all had a channel to turn to our language. The Bible study of which I was a part included bishops from Ghana, Kenya, England, Ireland, and New Zealand. We learned about one another's cultures and contexts. A bond between us formed quickly. The heart of our work there was relational. God's church for God's world. There's an exercise that preachers use, a game even, where we choose the key word of a biblical passage or a sentence or a phrase. Of course, there can be more than one key word in a phrase. They can all be key words. But my takeaway from this conference is a particular key word. And I bet the Archbishop of Canterbury would agree with me. For me, the key word is for. For. God's church for God's world. God's church exists for God's world. That's our purpose. William Temple, a former Archbishop of Canterbury, said, "The church is the only society that exists for the benefit of those who are not its members." God's church for God's world. In the homily this morning, I mentioned that God's world is in a mess. There's a theological term for that. We all know it and know it well. Sin. Sin. Think over the course of the 2 weeks there, Archbishop Welby named all the sins of the world, past and present. Sure seemed that way. That's not a criticism. And along with that, he named and confessed the sins of the church, at times apologizing on behalf of the church. Sins were named and confessed. And I'll say more about that momentarily. But first, I want to begin with the interpretation of a classic nursery rhyme as told by Professor Esther Mambo, a theologian at St. Paul's University in Kenya. Maybe you've heard the nursery rhyme. I had not. There's a hole in my bucket. Anybody know that one? Everybody knows it. I didn't know it. As told in East Africa, it goes like this. There's a hole in my bucket, dear mother, there's a hole in my bucket, dear mother, a hole. Then mend it, dear daughter, then mend it, dear daughter, mend it. Professor Mambo tells us, the rhyme presents a dialogue between a mother and a daughter, necessitated by a leaking bucket. She says, used metaphorically for this reflection, the bucket in this nursery rhyme refers to God's world, and the holes are the problems that affect our world today. She says this theme comes against the backdrop of a pandemic that has not only ravaged the economies of the world, but also exacerbated inequalities in access to health care and inequalities in race, gender, and social class. As if this is not enough, many of us here have come from places that are experiencing weather extremes, such as long droughts or floods or mudslides, and many more issues from Mother Nature. There's a hole in the bucket. The poor, the outcasts, the women, those with no rights or who suffer the most from this hole, this brokenness in the bucket, this brokenness in the world. And those who are lowest in the hierarchy and lowest in the world order are also made responsible to fix it, to save the water. To return to the rhyme, there's a hole in the bucket. To fix the leaking bucket, one needs straw. To cut straw, one needs a knife. To use a knife, one needs to sharpen it. But the sharpening stone must be damp, so one needs water. But to fetch water, one needs a bucket. Yet the bucket has a hole in it. Ultimately, it takes water to fix the hole in the bucket. But you can't fetch water because there's a hole in the bucket. As Professor Mambo says, the wholes, are the problems that affect our world today, which we are called to participate with Mother Creator in fixing. The Anglican Communion has a presence and ministry nearly all over the world, not quite the whole world. By virtue of his position as Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby has traveled all over this world and has relationships with leaders all over the world. He is a witness to the world's challenges, problems, and the seemingly hopeless holes in the bucket. To be sure, he has seen the beauty and the goodness, and he has witnessed to the power of the Holy Spirit and extraordinary faith. And he sees the sin and the effects that sinful systems have on everyone, especially the poor, the marginalized, and the powerless. He reports to us something I think we all know. He confirms that we are living in a particularly dark period of history. And he names some of the crises, including the economic challenges, climate change, war, even the culture wars. I know we all hate to be negative and we hate sounding pessimistic, especially at a celebration, but I remind us all that the gospel is bad news before it's good news. And furthermore, optimism and hope are not synonyms. Hope is not predicated on outward evidence or external circumstances. I'll also remind us that some of the most amazing moments in church history came out of our darkest moments, not unlike Easter following Good Friday. Archbishop Welby chooses Peter's first letter as our scriptural text for the entire gathering. He turns here to 1 Peter 5, 6 through 11, where Peter writes, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Discipline yourselves, keep alert. Like a roaring lion, your adversary the devil prowls around looking for someone to devour. Resist him, steadfast in your faith, for you know your brothers and sisters in all the world are undergoing the same kinds of suffering. And after you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, support, strengthen, and establish you. To him be the power forever and ever. Amen." Like a roaring lion. Like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil, prowls around looking for someone to devour. Roaring lions. Archbishop Welby names 5 roaring lions that the church needs to name and face. First, science and technology. That might sound like a surprising start, given that science and technology have been and can be used for so much good. He says, over the next 40 years, we will see the greatest changes that have ever happened in human history, possibly more than in the total of human history. These changes give humanity 2 possible ways to go. One is to give thanks to God for this knowledge and then share it. The other is for nations and institutions to hoard it and to shut out the poor and the powerless. That particular roaring lion has potential for good. It can be domesticated. Second, climate change. The consequences of climate change are not something we will face in the future. It is already a matter of life and death in low-lying countries. He did mention migration. 25 million people were refugees or immigration in modes of immigration after World War II. Right now it's 90 million. 90 million. Third, religious extremism. You may have heard me say this before. In times of deep sea change, times when one world is passing away and a new world is being born, there is a rise in religious extremism. Out of fear and uncertainty, people turn inwards and they seek absolute answers, leading to a rise in fundamentalism, religious extremism. Fourth, economic injustice and poverty. We live in a world where privileged fortresses sit in the midst of poverty. We have a global economic system where the poorest countries are used up and then discarded. There is a hole in the bucket. Fifth, the Archbishop's last roaring lion. He says that this lion is subtle and gentle and not as noticeable. Notice he says a lion does not roar when it's stalking its prey. The fifth lion is a culture that seeks to construct itself without God. He gives an example that shakes him to his core. Archbishop Welby made a recent trip to Canada to visit the survivors of residential school abuse. He came to make an apology on behalf of the Church of England, just as Pope Francis has done on behalf of Roman Catholics. The indigenous school system was created to isolate First Nation indigenous children from the influence of their own native culture and religion in order to assimilate them into the dominant Canadian culture. One such school, that's just an example, opened in 1834, was administered by the Anglican Church, many were, and this one remained open until 1970. Indigenous children were gathered up, separated from their families, brothers and sisters divided. They were moved to these residential schools where they suffered abuse, cruelty, and loss, including the loss of language and culture. And what shakes the Archbishop to his core is that no leading Christians at that time, no archbishops, stood up and said, "This is not Christ." Everyone accepted the cultural presupposition that some were more civilized and better, and therefore had the rights to do these things. No one, no archbishop stood up. And as he says, that is a cause for shame, as well as for repentance and a commitment to justice and reparations. These are 5 roaring lions from the perspective of one who has a unique vantage point to see the crises around the world. He implores us, he implores the bishops, shepherds cannot ignore roaring lions. The church must face the roaring lions. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a common thread among these 5 particular roaring lions. Each one of the roaring lions, science and technology, climate change, religious extremism, economic injustice, the residential school system, each one is systemic. Each one is systemic. The nursery rhyme, "There's a hole in my bucket," is a systemic problem. Personal responsibility alone is not going to fix it. Good, decent, faithful, unselfish, smart people can be trapped in a system that falls short of the glory of God. Someone needs to face the roaring lions. Someone needs to kick the door down. I want to take a theological look at systems for a moment. I'm going to use the work of a 20th century ethicist named Reinhold Niebuhr. Niebuhr observed that the first priority for any institution, a nation, a business, an organization, is survival. The institution, in order to exist, must stay afloat, must protect itself, must survive. So by definition, such an organization does not operate out of love, the agape love of which Jesus speaks and shows us. An organization cannot be completely selfless and sacrificial, cannot give freely of itself for the sake of another, cannot make a self-offering without regard for itself, as its first priority is survival. So all institutions, according to Niebuhr, fall short of expressing the kind of love expressed in the life and death of Jesus. But, he says, a human being can express such love. Systems and institutions may fall short, but you and I can express such love. As a society, for example, we are not likely, as a society, to construct a sin-free solution to our issues on the border, or a sin-free solution to protecting ourselves from terrorism, or a sin-free solution to feeding the world, or a sin-free solution to clean energy, or a sin-free solution to economic justice. Bluntly put, none of us is above the sin of the world. No system is perfect. But some systems, intended or not, oppress others. It might not be the intent, but it is the impact. And we know systems that oppress. We know systems that enslave. We know systems that marginalize. We know systems that keep children of God from flourishing in life. And as creative beings, made in the image of God, we can strive to create better systems that give all human beings the opportunity to flourish. And as human beings, we can express sacrificial love for the sake of others. We can love. Firefighters rushed into the Twin Towers. Remember that? Firefighters rushed into the Twin Towers, ran up smoke-filled stairs to save people they never met. Without regard for themselves and without regard for the worthiness or unworthiness of the victims they were attempting to save, firefighters sacrificed themselves for the sake of others. We are capable of love. We can choose love. We can share our resources. We can give up our time. We can forgive those who don't forgive us. We can forgive those who don't deserve forgiveness. We can love the unlovable and the unworthy. We can love. The Archbishop of Canterbury is calling this Anglican Communion in this moment, this dark period in history. He's calling this Anglican Communion to be God's church for God's world. The church is not an institution called to protect itself first. We are not called to survive, nor do we strive for survival. For we are saved already. As the Archbishop of York declared, Jesus has kicked the door down. We are God's church for God's world. And answering this call with you is my greatest privilege. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. So we've already had the break, right? So it is time for the first report to announce the election results if y'all are ready. Overseer. I think.
So where did Elizabeth go? I wonder if she ran to the restroom. I don't have the results. Should we go? And we could go ahead and go to the Bishop of Bailey's if you want.
Okay. Go to what?
Bishop Bailey's, isn't that the next thing on? And we can just delay this. We'll probably, there she is. She'll bring it.
She's on her way. Okay. You want me to? So I do it all.
He was elected, no election, and then this is how, so we only have
So
two more
stay
ballots.
up here, all right? So, okay, I'm going to announce what we have so far. Trustees, John Caldwell got 40.68%. These are all percentages. Helen Benton, 34.75%. Mike Denny, 16.1%. Bill Aikman, 8.4%. There'll be a runoff between the top two, John Caldwell and Helen Benton. Stan,
Oh, you want to run the whole thing
We
again?
have to run the whole thing.
Okay,
unless
even
somebody
though they're,
withdraws.
okay, all right.
at this point, I'm wrong.
And I too. We're gonna
All
run-
four. You vote again on all four. Did you get the percentages? Okay. Standing Committee Clergy, Ricardo Lopez was elected with 70%. Executive Council Clergy, Corey Cabes, 38.33. Dee Dee Ballou, 33.33. Justin Gibson, 28.33. How do you have 33? Somebody split there. So no election there. No election. General Convention Deputies, Clergy. Mike Emer, 85%. Ricardo Lopez, 79.17. Paige McKay, 77.33. Miriam Scott, 59.17. And they are all elected. David Romanek, 57.5, and Bob Hennigan, 45.83. And there'll be a later election for the alternates in order. General Convention Deputy Lay. Carla Oliva, 90.83%. Dan Wigner, 79.17. Mary Emeny, 65.83. Kathy Balch, 59.17. And they are all elected. And then we will, Shelley Neighbors and had 57.5, and Margie Netherton, 47.5. And so we will have election, a vote on that as well. What do we do next?
I don't have the script in front of me.
Second ballot. Do we want to do that now, or we want to?
Again, it went past last time, but I just don't want to.
I tell you what.
We need to make the ballot, so it'll take us just a few minutes. so we
Well,
can
we're
do
going to
that.
start with, we're going to bring up our guest.
That's what I think
Dave
we should
Bailey.
do.
Dave Bailey, Bishop of the Navajo Land Area Mission. Dave is, Dave's been a bishop since 2010, I believe. I can't tell you how many years he has served Navajo land, and just some of you may know this. I know some of you know this, others don't. Dave went to seminary at the same time with Clifton Mann, and they were like best friends. And he's very close with Joe Craig now as well. And this is one of the most respected bishops you will ever meet. He is just the best guy. Anyway, I'm looking forward to his presentation, and I'm going to let you come on up here, and I'm going to get out of the way.
Before I get started, I want to recognize the hospitality that you all have exhibited to me on behalf of the Diocese of Northwest Texas. From my wonderful visit with Edson, who met me at the airport and has chauffeured me around and taken great care of me, and the opportunity that I've had to spend some time with you all a little bit yesterday, and then again this morning. You are to be admired and appreciated for the hospitality that you show to a stranger. So thank you for that. I was going to tell you the Cliff Mann stories. No, I'm kidding about that. Because some of those I can't tell. So, but as Bishop Scott did indicate, Cliff was my best friend in my time in my life in the seminary. And sadness for me was that our journeys took us to different places, and he continued to be in Texas, and I went back to Arizona, and so the only time that we really had to be in relationship was by phone, and occasionally we would get a chance to get together. But he was so supportive of me and my ministry and my journey, and to get to know Joe was just an extreme pleasure, and I'm blessed to know her and now to know Cliff. So I feel a connection to you all in being here. Couple of things. I brought a book, just for your own information. I'm going to throw it in the Diocesan Library. 1491. I don't know whether you all have had a chance to read this or not. The title is significant because it's not 1492. 1491, but it's a new Revelations of America before Columbus. And it truly gives a sense of the relationship the indigenous community had with one another, trades that were going on and other things prior to the time of Columbus. I'm going to leave that with you all to be able to get from the Diocesan office or whatever. Also, I'd ask Elizabeth to offer to you, and I don't know where, Elizabeth, where did we put these? Okay. This is the newsletter. This happens to be the spring newsletter from Navajo Land, and I brought probably about 75 or 80 copies that are in the back that if you'd like to pick up, it'll give you a little bit of information about that. I could stand up here and talk to you about Navajo Land literally for the next 8 hours. And so I'm going to try to hold my conversation to some specific points. I'm going to visit with you a little bit about the history of the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land. I'm going to talk a little bit about Navajo Land prior to it becoming the Navajo Land Area Mission and what took place with that. I'll speak a little bit about that journey up until the time of my election of bishop, and then I'll talk with you about the things that have taken place in the 12 years that I've been honored and fortunate enough to serve as bishop in the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land. Did you all know that I flunked retirement? Okay. I retired in 2008, and I went back to Arizona, and I had served as canon of the ordinary, in Utah, and it was a wonderful journey, and it was one of the best jobs I've had in the life of the church. And I told my bishop, it's time for me to go, and I'm going to go on back. And so I did. I went back home to Arizona and retired, and that lasted 2 weeks. And my bishop called me, and she said, David, I'm going to retire in a year and a half, and I'm not going to hire another canon of the ordinary. So would you come back up here for another year or so and do what you were doing? I said, oh, sure. So I went back up to Utah, and I served until December, because she was going to retire in May. And so I served until December and retired again in the end of 2009. The House of Bishops was meeting in Salt Lake in that October, and the presiding bishop, through her canon of the ordinary, called me up and said, I would like to visit with you about Navajo land. I had no idea what she wanted to visit about, but I've been involved with Navajo land off and on since 1988. And so I went down and I visited with her, and the next thing I knew was she was saying, would you consider going and being bishop in Navajo land? So I said, well, yeah, we'll see about that. Now, you must know that in 2009, I was 69 years of age. Okay? Now, you see what's going to happen, right? Okay, you see the problem coming, right? Okay. And so anyhow, we went through all that process, and I was elected. I'm the only bishop in Navajo land's history that has been elected by the Navajo. Every other bishop has been appointed by the House of Bishops. And so it was really exciting to be honored and to appreciated by the Navajo and to be elected. And I was elected in October of 2009 and then ratified by the House of Bishops in March of 2010 and then consecrated on August 7th in 2010. And I said to my wife, I said, honey, in your wildest dreams, could you believe that I would be Bishop of Navajo land? And she said, honey, you're not in my wildest dreams. I'm smart enough not to pursue that. Okay. So, as I said, I've had the joy of being able to serve them. And as happens, and I'm sure that you've had this experience too, that what we see from the outside and what we think we know from the outside is not necessarily what we find when we get on the inside. And that was certainly true for Navajo land, because I was not aware, even though I'd been involved with Navajo land, both when I was in Arizona and both when I was in Utah, with Navajo land, I had no idea of the difficulties that Navajo land was experiencing. Give you some factual things that I have that I think might be important for you, and if you remember, I'm going to try to journey this along. Navajo land is one of 574 federally recognized tribes. 229 of those are in Alaska. Navajo land itself has registered roughly about 400,000 Navajo people. Those that live on the reservation vary from 160 to 185,000, depending on employment and other factors that go along with that. Navajo land is 27,000 square miles, about the size of West Virginia, and is the largest geographical reservation that we have in the United States. Navajo land, they are anticipating that by 2050, there will only probably be 2 tribes that will continue to use their language and know their language, and that's going to be the Cherokee and the Navajo. And so there's a real need to continue to try to work on capturing the languages of other tribes. The Episcopal Church has been involved with Navajo land since roughly the 1890s. The history of Navajo land, and we heard Bishop Scott talk a little bit about the boarding schools in Canada and the Archbishop. Boarding schools began to do their work in the late 19th century and carrying over into the 20th century, and that didn't stop until 1972 here in the United States. But in 1830 was the Indian Relocation Act that was put in place by President Jackson. And that's really what led to the Trail of Tears and a number of things that I'm sure you remember through history. In the moving of indigenous people off of their land, primarily for the benefit of those who were trying to grow cotton and other things. That was part of the move there. How that impacted the Navajo was by the expansion of commerce and other things by Europeans and others, by the United States, finally impacted the West by roughly around 1860. And the two major tribes at that time that were causing problems for the United States were the Apache and the Navajo. And primarily because they felt that they were being invaded and were fighting back over that invasion. By 1863, 1864, the Navajo experienced what is called the Long Walk. And the Long Walk was similar to the Trail of Tears, where Kit Carson and a band of Ute agents went into Canyon de Chelly and did a scorched earth policy, and that was the final act on driving the Navajo out of their homeland, and marched them to Bosque Redondo, which was over at Fort Sumner, New Mexico, roughly 400 plus miles on a forced march. There were over 53 forced marches from 1863 to about 1866. Most of the indigenous populations that were moved off of their land never had an opportunity to return. That was not so for the Navajo, because the Navajo were able to convince the government to let them return home. And so they were able to go back within the four sacred mountains. The land not as large as it was when they left, but again, being able to go back into the four sacred mountains, which was extremely important to their spirituality and understanding of culture and tradition. The thing that we don't think about when we think about reservations is that we think about reservations as having sovereign rights and it's sort of a nation and things like that. A reservation is another form of incarceration, because that was the intent. And the intent was to take a people that were different than us and place them in an isolated situation and then control them in any way that you can control them so they're no longer a problem. That was the intent in terms of providing, if you will, reservations. And so that was what took place for the Navajo. But they were able to go back to their own place. They were able to go and build and do some things there. By the 1890s, the bishop of what would have been then New Mexico, because Arizona was not a state, so New Mexico was also part of Arizona, became aware that there was not health care being provided for Navajo people over at Fort Defiance, New Mexico, because it was not Arizona, it was Arizona territory. And he made a trip out from Albuquerque and investigated that, and out of his visit at Good Shepherd Mission, he formed formally Good Shepherd Mission Hospital for the Navajo. And that's how the relationship really began with the Episcopal Church. And it really happened because of some lay women from New York, Upper New York, and from a lieutenant in the cavalry who was an Episcopalian and let them know of what was going on back there. And so they began to build that. 1922, the focus then shifted to the Farmington area because the church at that time was really about health and wholeness, And how do we respond to the health and wholeness of Navajo? Because they weren't welcome in white people's hospitals and or healthcare. So in Farmington, in between 1919 and 1922, do you remember what was happening in 1919, 1922? But what else? The Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was taking place, and Navajo were not welcome into white people's hospital. So in 1922, the final cornerstone was laid for the hospital in Farmington for Navajo people, built by the Navajo with help from the Episcopal Church. In 1944 to 46, in Bluff, Utah, at St. Christopher's, Baxter Liebler, who was a priest out of Connecticut and had come to Navajo land and had embraced Navajo culture and understanding, built a clinic to help pregnant Navajo women to give birth and began to provide health care. So the Episcopal Church has had a history, if you will, of trying to provide health and wholeness to Navajo people. Navajo people have continued to, through the century, to experience the difficulties. Bishop Scott spoke to the boarding school incident, and we have documentation of white people coming in their pickup trucks and literally grabbing children, off the road, and taking them off to boarding school without the parents having any idea of what's going on. There's written documentation of that. But the boarding school was a problem because, again, it was trying to take away the culture and tradition. Okay. Following the boarding school incidents, incidentally went on to 1972. Because the boarding schools did not stop until the federal government brought a stop to it in 1972. And so I can remember as a child growing up in Phoenix, my mother was an educator, and I was probably about 9 or 10, and my mother and I were going somewhere downtown, and here is this chain link fence down on 7th Avenue and Indian School Road, where there are children hanging on the fence looking out, and I'm on the outside looking in. And I said to my mother, "What did those children do wrong?" And she said, "Oh, they didn't do anything wrong. They're just Indian children at school." And I can still visualize that and see that in my mind, and I'm thinking, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that's the situation that existed at that particular time. In between 1944 and 1946, the federal government put in place what they called the Livestock Reclamation Act, which basically dictated how many sheep, horses, cows Navajo people could have. And their rationale was that it was overgrazing on the reservation, and consequently it was causing runoff and was going to affect the building of Boulder Dam. And so you can begin to see the continuing impact that federal government has had over the years on a people, and the impact of that today is still existent because we're dealing with intergenerational trauma. The Navajo people never talked about that. The people that experienced the Bosque Redondo trip, the long walk, came back from that and never talked about that experience. Because culture did not allow them to talk about that. And so consequently, while they experienced that, and what we would know today as post-traumatic stress syndrome had affected them in a similar kind of way, which then impacted their families. And you see that pass on from generation to generation to generation. Okay? And so part of what the church has tried to do, the Episcopal Church has tried to do, and other mainline denominations, is to begin to respond in terms of health and wholeness. Navajo land is a matrilineal society, and so the role of the woman plays an extremely important role. And so what we're trying to do today is to find how we can provide health and wholeness to women and the families, because it'll impact the whole society. So we're continuing to work on that. Let me see what else I wanted to share with you real quick. Navajo land was in 3 dioceses to begin with when it began. And so it would have been in the Diocese of Utah, and the Diocese of Rio Grande, and the Diocese of Arizona. And that took place roughly from 1894 up until 1978. And there was not a lot of what I would call commingling or networking, if you will, because we're roughly looking at a transportation problem, and we're looking at between the 3 regions, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, roughly 2.5 hours by today's standards. And so you can begin to know what it would be back when you would have had a buckboard or horse or the transportation that we had back then. So there was no interaction necessarily between the 3 regions. In 1978, the House of Bishops felt that there was enough population in the 3 regions to look at what if we brought that together as a diocese, and we would have an indigenous diocese. Now, I've been around this church long enough to say that that was part of the reason. The other part of that reason was economic. They felt that if they could pull it together like that the cost that it was impacting on the 3 dioceses would be lessened, because now they could fund it out of general convention and begin to have proper funding and not have that demand on the respective diocese. So in 1978, Navajo Area Mission was formed, one of 3 missions of the Episcopal Church. The other 2 are Guam and the churches in Europe. But we are a mission of the Episcopal Church. And so the Episcopal Church has responsibility for us in a lot of ways. And so we're funded out of the General Convention budget. And where's Mike? Mike is to be applauded again, because this past General Convention, Mike was extremely gracious, along with Bishop Fisher, in hearing the 4 aided dioceses come together, the 4 bishops, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Alaska, and present to them as a body concerns that we had for indigenous ministry and where they're going to go, and they graciously listened to us and have responded. So Mike, thanks so much for that. Trying to think where I want to go with this. So in 78, the House of Bishops formed us. In 79, General Convention ratified that at the 79 convention, and the Navajo Land Area Mission was formed. The bulk of the Navajo reservation is in Arizona, and so the decision was that Province 8 would be the province in which Navajo land would dwell. It would make more sense that we were over here with y'all, but that's not what they decided. And the funding, how many of you were around and know the term Coalition 14? Do any of you know that term? Oh, good. I'm glad to at least see somebody recognize that. Coalition 14 was the funding source that provided for the 14 missionary districts and Navajo land, because at that time, Arizona, Hawaii, Utah, none of those were full-fledged dioceses. They were really missionary districts in the process of forming. So they formed Coalition 14 with the intent of being a vehicle to fund those 14 dioceses in Navajo land. And so that's sort of how it was funded in terms of that particular time. And it continued on that way until probably around, I'm guessing, 2002, when Coalition 14 ceased to exist. And then funding went directly now to DFM, to what was PBNF, and then now is going to be General Convention. So we move ahead from 79. We have, in that period of time, we have 6 bishops from 78 until Stephen Plummer is elected. And Stephen Plummer was Navajo and was the first Navajo bishop. And he was elected and consecrated in 1990. So from 1978 to 1990, you have 6 what I would call absentee bishops. They had other jurisdictions, but then they would come in and do confirmations and that kind of stuff. Stephen served from 1990 to his death in 2006, of when he died of cancer. The funding that was available for Navajo land was limited. Stephen was to have a mentor to walk with him and to help him understand about becoming a bishop and being a bishop and how to do that. And his mentor was Bishop Wes Frensdorf, who at that time was the Bishop of Nevada, and resigned from that position, took a part-time job with the Diocese of Arizona, helping out Bishop Joe Houston, and then a third time was to be in Navajo land and to help Stephen in his journey of being a bishop. That was a disaster to happen because Wes Frensdorf, returning from a confirmation service in Page, Arizona, was killed in an airplane crash on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, which took away Stephen's mentor, if you will, and good friend. And so Stephen found himself in many ways alone in learning what it meant to be a bishop and having the support they needed, and it was a difficult period of time. And Stephen, by 1994, found himself in difficulty himself and was suspended for about a year. And that's where I really began to pick up my work, because the presiding bishop asked me if I would go to Navajo land about every 6 weeks and be Stephen's administrative mentor. And so that, between Coalition 14 and that's sort of how I began to get involved with Navajo land. Navajo land did not have very many priests. Most of the clergy in Navajo land that came were Anglos. We had no indigenous priests at that particular time. We had lay pastors that were Navajo in really the 3 regions, and they sort of made sure that they sort of served like a deacon, but they were a lay pastor, and so they would make sure things were set up for meetings and things that were set up for services and things like that, and did a wonderful job. But they were paid a pittance, and at that time they didn't have any pension, so it was just whatever they had. And so then Stephen was elected. Stephen went from, like I said, from 1990 to 2006. At that time there were there were 3 Navajo clergy, counting Stephen, a couple of Anglo clergy that were trying to help out, but it was very limited in terms of clergy, particularly in terms of Navajo clergy. When I took over, I was elected, I took over in 2010. I had 1 Navajo priest, and I had 1 Anglo priest. We used to have churches across the entire reservation, and if you've ever been out there, when I talk about that, back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we had congregations that went from Farmington clear over to Tuba City, which is the Highway 89 over by Flagstaff and that area. It goes up to Page. We had congregations just outside of Page at Navajo Mountain. and we had congregations literally all over the reservation. Small. When I talk about a congregation, y'all, if we had this many people, it'd be wonderful, okay? So I'm talking, we're talking about a congregation, you have maybe 25, 30 people, because they were primarily clan gatherings that were there. By the time I became bishop, we were down to 6 congregations that were functioning, with 2 clergy and myself, and I had 2 lay pastors left. Okay? And so what I was asked to do was to come in and to raise up Navajo leadership, both clergy and lay, and then to begin the restructure and the rebuilding of the Episcopal Church in Navajo. Now, I want you to hear this in that I'm being asked by the presiding bishop to consider this in October of 2008, thinking I know what I'm getting into. Okay. And now it's August of 2010. The date is August 8th. I was ordained August 7th. And now I know what I'm into. Okay. And so we began literally to rebuild the church. How many of you know Cornelia Eaton? Okay, you know Cornelia. Cornelia is my can of the ordinary, and Cornelia is literally my right hand. And her mother, Alice Mason, was a lay pastor, and I'll tell you a story about that in just a minute about her mother. But between the 2 of them, they literally have helped me move forward in terms of what I'm doing and in terms of the building of the church. And it's been a joy. It's been a challenge. I had to let my one Navajo priest go and start over. And the reason I was going to tell you the story about Cornelia's mom, one of the things that I did is that I formed a group of Navajo elders when I first became bishop, because I wanted to be sure as a Belagana, as an Anglo, as an outsider, that I was honoring culture and I was honoring tradition. And I really needed to hear from the elders that I was doing this right and that I wasn't making mistakes. And this one particular priest was having difficulty, and I kept trying to work with this person and help them to resolve some issues. And so I went to my elders and I said, this is what's going on. What should I do? And this is what I'm trying to do. And they supported what I was doing. And 6 months later, I went back to my elders and I said, this is not working. And so this is what I'm doing. And what do you think about that? And they encouraged me to go ahead and do that. So years gone by. And so I go to my elders and I said, this isn't working. What do you think I should do? And Cornelia's mom said, well, you probably just ought to fire her. And I said, well, I'm not ready to do that. Okay. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to try this. So another 6 months goes by and we try that, and that's not working. And so I go back 6 months. Now it's a year and a half, right? And so I go back to my elders, and they all listen to me, and they nod and all that stuff. And so, again, Alice Mason looks at me and says, Bishop, you just need to fire her. And I said, oh, okay. So, well, I'm going to try this, I said. So, okay. So I try that. So now it's 2 years, okay? Now, this is 2 years of dealing with the same problem, okay? And so I go back and I said, okay, this is what's going on, and I think I've run out of ways to go forward. What do you think I should do? And Alice looks at me and she says, Bishop, you're just too soft. Fire her. And so I ended up having to, actually I didn't have to fire her, because she was old enough and I was able to say, this isn't working. And why don't, because now you're on pension, and why don't we find a way that you might resign so that you've got, and so we were able to resolve the problem in a healthy and positive way. But my elder council is pretty direct with me about how to go forward and make sure I'm doing stuff. How are we doing on time? We're okay? I can talk about Navajo land all day, and that's not fair to you all, and so I'd like to throw it open to Q&A, and if any of you had a question that you wondered about or asked about or wanted to know, it would give you an opportunity to do that. Edson?
Could you say something about the incorporation of Navajo culture into the Episcopal approach to Christianity?
Sure. On the reservation, there are three expressions of spirituality. And so you have the traditional Navajo culture in terms of they embrace Navajo spirituality and choose not necessarily to have anything to do with Christianity. And then you have that group of Christians that basically say you need to deny your Indianness, embrace Jesus Christ, and forget the fact that you're Navajo. And then you have the third group, which is really where the mainline denominations are, Episcopal and Lutheran and Presbyterian and Methodist and Roman Catholic, that embrace some form of Navajo spirituality in the midst of the work that we're doing. The Episcopal Church is probably the most progressive in that we embrace and support all Navajo culture and tradition. When I do ordinations, and I've been blessed to have 7 Navajo clergy ordained since I've been bishop, 4 with MDivs, and so I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited and appreciative of both CDSP, Church School of the Pacific, and Virginia Seminary for providing us with scholarships to make that happen. But where I was going with that is that we really try to embrace the medicine man. If I'm doing the ordination, we'll have the medicine man come and be a part of the ordination and the work that's going on there, recognizing the 4 sacred mountains and the 4 directions, and offering blessing way prayers for our ordinand. We have Navajo included in the service, so that the Lord's Prayer is done in Navajo land. The bishop does his blessing or her blessing, depending if we have a female bishop with us. But we also have the blessing way prayer at the end, so we have a Navajo blessing way prayer at the end. The gospel is done both in Navajo and in English, and so we really embrace that. When I have a Navajo person who's been raised on the fact that they have to give up their Navajo-ness, where they're not free to wear their jewelry, as an example, into church because that's not acceptable. They're not allowed to bring any of their traditional dress into the church because it's not acceptable. I remind them of our Bible and the fact that there is an Old Testament in our Bible and that there is a New Testament in our Bible. And the Old Testament speaks to the old ways and the old relationships and the understanding of that relationships for the Hebrew people, and that they're introduced to a new way through the life of Jesus the Christ and a new perspective and a new understanding. And I remind them that prior to knowing Christ, that they have an Old Testament and that they live out of the traditions and cultures that they once embraced, and that the relationship that they have. So to deny where they were on their own journey is really to take away part of who they are, but to recognize that in the perspective of Jesus the Christ and what he now brings to the table in a new and different way for them. So it's freed up a number of them to be able to continue to move forward in terms of their own culture and their own traditions, their own language, at the same time continuing to worship and be a part of the Christian community. So thank you for that, Edson. So, yeah. Anybody else? Please, Justin.
So I think I've heard a lot of
I'm smiling because I've not paid him to say this. Thank you for the question. What has happened in the past prior to my episcopate is what you're talking about, is that groups would come over and they would do. And those things, the things they did were important for us. But they would come over and do a project. The Navajo may or may not interact with them, depending on when the time was. And then they would go, and a lot of it that you saw with youth groups would come and they would have an experience, or small group. And it was almost like checking a box. And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all. I mean, because we didn't know enough as to how to interact with that, and you all didn't know enough, and so we just did the best that we could do. One of the things that I brought to the table, and it is changing, is that I asked us, as we looked at that as Navajo land, that let's be clear about what we're asking people to come and do, and then we're asking them also at that same time to teach us how to do that, so that we're able then to be able to do it ourselves, build that relationship, and then continue that relationship with them coming and doing something else. And so we've begun that process when I first became a bishop. We now are moving to the pilgrimage idea, where we're really looking at a relationship and what that might be, and building the relationship first. Doesn't take away from the projects if folks want to do that. And with our infrastructure being what it was, and with deferred maintenance that we've had for 75 years, literally, we have a lot of work that can be done in terms of the physical plant. But we're really looking at how can we begin to share with those that come and be with us the history, the spirituality, the physical locale of what it means to be in Navajo land. I am in the process of, when I say I, this has been a mutual group, because it's not I, it's about what we've done together. But we're in the process of finishing up in Bluff, Utah, at St. Christopher's, a cultural and reconciliation center, where we will have at some point, hopefully by the end of next year, we will have 14 tiny houses. We will have 7 tiny houses done by Christmas, where we can have up to 12 people come at a time from hopefully faith communities, and be instructed by the Navajo on Navajo culture. Be able to engage with Navajo about Navajo traditions and culture, be able to go to some of the historical sites on Navajo land, but about relationship and about pilgrimage. And we hope to be able to get something out of that by spring in terms of inviting people to do that. Since I've been bishop, we've been able to develop 2 hospitality houses, where we now can have people come to all 3 regions and spend some time. And now that I have 5 active Navajo clergy, we're now able to do more than we were able to do before. But we really are about the relationship. We really feel that we have a lot to give and to offer to the church, and we want to be able to do that. But to do that, we need to be able to tell our story and have an opportunity for you all to be able to hear that story. And so it's not, people used to come to fix us. You know, we're not in the fixing business anymore. We're into welcoming a stranger, as you all did with me. You know, come and be with us. Come and get to know us. So is that helpful?
Yeah, I just think in order for reconciliation to happen, that relationship has to happen. But then those of us who've been on the other side, we need healing too.
Exactly.
And that power differential needs to be flipped, where it's not us
Right.
coming in, setting up
Right.
more schools, right? But us sitting at the feet of Navajo clergy and learning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I want to be clear, and thank you for that. I want to be clear that no person in this room has caused the trauma that's taken place for our indigenous population. There's not a one of us in this room that caused that. We may have been a part of it because we're a part of who we are here in terms of the nation. But we all can be a part of the healing of that. And that's what I'm hearing you say, is that opportunity to come and learn. And so we're looking at it as an educational opportunity, not an accusatory kind of thing, but really coming to spend some time with us and hear how can we begin to come together in ways that are different. The reality is it is what it is, but how do we move out of that? So hopefully that's helpful. And would love to hear from every one of you if you're interested in coming. I'm getting ready to talk with St. Andrews and Joe and all that. And I've invited Mary to come and be hang out over in Farmington. Yeah, Mary, please. Please. Yeah, thank you. That's the hope. That's the hope. And there's different ways that we can interact. What we're trying to do now is, rather than y'all just coming, it used to be, if you've been out there, and some of you probably have, is that you'd call up and whoever you talked to, the priest or whoever it was at Good Shepherd or at All Saints or whatever, and say, we'd like to bring a group out. And they'd say, okay, you can come on this date. And you'd come out and there'd be no preparation. And you'd just show up and then you'd do the task. And they'd thank you and you'd go home. Okay, we're not doing that anymore. If you want to be in relationship with us, then there needs to be some preparatory work that takes place. In terms of relationship with us, some educational things that you can do before you can come, so that we can help you in terms of your own comfort in being able to come into a different situation. So, yeah. I got one in the back of the room, Scott. One more. I can do one more. Youth ministry has been difficult for us because of leadership. We've been able to, just recently, we were able to go over to North Dakota, South Dakota, in terms of that gathering. Part of the conflict we run into is when things are scheduled, they also impact our school-age kids, so they're not able to go, but we're balancing on that. We finally have in our budget a youth ministry, but it's taken this long to be able to get there. We have a layperson, G.J. Gordy, who has taken on the responsibility of youth ministry as it applies on a diocesan level. And so in terms of being able to go to EYE and things like that, we're able to do that and find the funding for that. But it's been a difficulty in the past with funding. We recently have gotten some grants that are allowing us to do that. And so interesting that you ask that, because that's on the agenda for our council meeting next Saturday, as to then how do we begin to work on that on a regional basis. So I'll get back to you on that one. Okay. I think I've been called. And so thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you.
I think we got a taste. There's a whole lot more that we could have covered, and Bishop Dave will be around this evening, be around in the morning early before he takes off. But anyway, we have to turn this room is why I had to cut it off. I'm sorry. We attempting the elections committee, or we can't do that? Okay. So I call on Debbie Cox, dispatch of business.
Thank you, Bishop. For this afternoon's announcements, listen up because we got a couple new ones. Evaluations will be completed online this year. At the end of the convention, you'll receive an email with a link to complete this evaluation. If you prefer to complete a paper evaluation, please see Elizabeth. If you are not currently receiving the monthly diocesan newsletter via email, please go to our diocesan website and subscribe. Give generously to the UTO via the boxes on your tables. If you haven't already done so, please ensure our UTO in-gathering coordinator, Vangie Peak of Holy Trinity Midland, has the name of your congregation's representative. All the representatives will gather at 9:15 tomorrow morning for instructions in this corner over here, the banner corner. Okay, we apologize because in the announcements this morning about the vendors, we neglected to talk about one, and that is the Farms to Community vendor. They are supported by St. Andrews and St. Peter's of Amarillo, and they assist immigrants from Ukraine. And they're just outside the south double doors. Don't forget all the vendors. They have some really cool stuff and exhibitors. There's lots of items for sale. The proceeds all go to excellent ministries. The vendors will not be open this evening during social hour, but will be open again tomorrow morning. Immediately after dismissal today, members, the old and new members of the Standing Committee, are going to meet in this corner. This is a cool corner, the banner corner, right after the meeting is over today. And this is the most important announcement. Tonight's social hour will begin at 6 o'clock in this facility, this room. There will be 2 pay-as-you-go bars. One in the... Was that funny? One in the foyer near the outdoor patio, which is right outside these double doors, and another in the back of the room. They will both offer attractive non-alcoholic beverages as well. Please note that the bars will not accept cash. Let me say that again. The bars will not accept cash for non-alcoholic or alcoholic. They will only accept credit and debit cards. They will only accept credit and debit cards. Dinner will be buffet style and will be in this room beginning at 7 o'clock. There will be open seating, so sit where you want. Dinner will be followed by dancing with the band Love Loud, beginning at 8:30. Is that it? Okay, the final thing for tonight is everything must be removed from your tables when you depart this afternoon. The tables need to be set up for our dinner tonight, so please bring back your convention information tomorrow morning, which will begin at 9:30. If you will not be attending tonight's events or tomorrow's business meeting, please place your name tag in the basket on the distribution table in the back of the room. It's a really big basket back there. You can't miss it. Remember, all voting members must sign the credential sheet again tomorrow morning. Please arrive early enough to do so. Thank you.
I'm going to call on, but first, Chris. One, Chris Rampelmeyer, resolutions, one resolution.
This is kind of a teaser for tomorrow. This is a resolution on stepping off and stepping up. Whereas the Reverend Mary Glover has shown great resolve in convention after convention of this diocese, whereas her insights have captured both the saintly and the silly moments of these gatherings, whereas there is something about Mary. No one writes and delivers a courtesy resolution like her. Whereas Clint Eastwood once said, a man's got to know his limitations, but Mary's a woman. So working on a roof seemed like a good idea. Whereas today we miss the humor and poetry of her resolutions. Whereas it takes two to replace Mary on the resolutions committee, but the Reverends Rachel Petty and Courtney Jones this week cheerfully accepted being drafted either to win high praise or to humiliate themselves before this august body. Be it therefore resolved by this 64th Annual Diocesan Convention of Northwest Texas that we wish Mary a speedy and complete recovery, that as we wish Mary a speedy and complete recovery, looking forward to her return to us, we thank Rachel and Courtney for jumping in the breach. As we say in Spanish, ¡Viva la resolución!
I take it we're all in favor. Yes. I'd like to call upon Jim Walker, Vicar St. Luke's, Levelland, for worship. It's in these booklets. Look like this.
I hate to follow Chris. Good afternoon. God's love and blessings to each one of you. The service is on this sheet of paper. As shadows lengthen, we are filled by the day's encounters. Now more than ever, we accept the depth and breadth of God's grace. As you have loved us, may you love one another. Let us pray. O tree of Calvary, send your roots deep into my soul. Gather together my frailties, my soiled heart, my sandy instability, and my muddy desires, and entwine them with the strong roots of your arboreal love. Amen. Let us say together the following words of praise. Lord God, we praise you for those riches of our creation that we will never see, for stars whose light will never reach the earth, for species of living things that were born, that flourished and perished before humankind appeared in the world, for patterns and colors in the flowers, which only insect eyes are able to see, for strange high music that humans can never hear. Lord God, you see everything that you made, and behold that it is very good. A reading from John. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, isn't that really what friendship is all about? Giving to each other the gift of our belovedness. Where do we need to offer and receive the gift of our belovedness? How can we treat the earth as beloved? As the day lengthens, O Christ, teach us to walk in your while we strive to be faithful in word and deed.
Teach us to love one another.
While we live as part of your creation.
Teach us to love this good earth.
While we offer our prayers this hour. With grateful hearts,
Teach us to trust in your love.
let us pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Gracious Lord, the air sings with songs of glory, water flashes silver with creation, and the forest bloom with leaves for healing nations. May your light and love fill our hearts and souls and minds, that we may share your love with the world. Amen. As you have loved us,
may we love one another.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I declare this convention adjourned until 9:30 in the morning. What time's supper? Social hour at 6, dinner at 7.